Your heart races, your palms sweat, you lose your grip on whatever you're holding, and your mind completely blanks. This is the physiological reality of freezing when a decision feels too large to handle. Thousands of years ago, on the dusty plains of Kurukshetra, the greatest warrior of his era experienced this exact same paralysis. Surrounded by millions of soldiers, he broke down. This was Arjuna. Moments before the outbreak of a massive war, he dropped his bow and sat down in his chariot, refusing to fight. He was suffering from dharma sankat, a state of moral confusion. Looking at the opposing army, he saw his own uncles, cousins, and teachers. To Arjuna, walking away felt like a righteous act of compassion to save his family. His charioteer, Krishna, challenged him directly. He diagnosed Arjuna's refusal as a failure of character, calling this supposed compassion a symptom of inner weakness. Labeling a breakdown as empathy or moral superiority can be a psychological defense. It allows us to avoid the terror of a difficult choice by reframing our fear as a virtue. To break this paralysis, Krishna first had to deconstruct Arjuna's understanding of life and death. This diagram illustrates the Atman. Notice the white center circle, embedded within physical and subtle bodies, remaining distinct. Krishna argues this essence is insulated from physical harm. As noted here, the soul is eternal and indestructible, never born, never dies. Mental clarity begins when we stop focusing on the temporary changes of physical reality and recognize this indestructible core. However, philosophy doesn't change the fact that Arjuna was still standing on a battlefield. Arjuna was anchored to that moment by his duty as a warrior. Krishna argued that abandoning a righteous fight would cause more chaos than walking away would prevent. This creates a difficult question. How do you take action in a high-stakes scenario without being crippled by the fear of causing harm? This flowchart shows the framework of karma yoga, the separation of physical action from the emotional desire for a specific result. Your energy is severed from the outcome and placed entirely into the execution. This leads to a state of equanimity. A person simply performs their task with sincerity, removing their ego from the success or failure of the work. Effectiveness comes from the disciplined execution of the work in front of you, rather than a desperate desire to win. Logic alone isn't always enough to break a deep freeze. Krishna eventually provided a visceral demonstration of how the universe operates. This was the revelation of the Vishvarupa, Krishna's universal form. It proved that the fate of every being on that field was already determined by a higher cosmic order. Because the grand outcome was already set, Arjuna's only remaining purpose was to surrender his ego and act as an instrument of that larger plan. This shifts the burden of the world off the individual. When you recognize that you aren't the general manager of the universe, the pressure of making the perfect choice begins to dissolve. Freedom is achieved by mastering internal emotions and executing your immediate duty, while surrendering the final outcome to the universe.